Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MTV Spider-Man Retrospectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 11 of Spider-Man the New Animated Series, When Sparks Fly. And just like I said last week, this episode marks the return of this show's version of Electro. And this time we actually get to see him doing some proper supervillain stuff. In this case, what's going on is he seems to be stalking one of his classmates. In this case, a girl named Sally. I briefly talked about Sally in Electro's initial episode, as apparently she was when Max went to that party that Sigma Alpha Chi was throwing. When he was just hanging around there, he and Sally briefly connected, so to speak. And by connected, I mean he saw her, she's noticed him looking at her, and she just kind of smiled and blushed. They didn't really talk, but he almost engaged. And apparently, well, ever since that night, ever since he went Electro, she's been a little on edge. And that kind of comes to a head when during a chemistry class, while she's taking notes on her laptop, she suddenly gets a message on there that asks her, "Hey Sally, can you ask Professor Williams, because the professor's name is Professor Williams, who got the highest score on the test?" And so she does ask, and sure enough, the one who got the highest score was Max Dillon. Of course, with that little mention, it's getting Sally a bit on edge, but she does manage to power through it, and she and MJ end up telling each other that they end up promising that they'll exchange notes to help with the upcoming midterm on the chemistry exam. As such, the episode then kind of cuts to Sally when she's in her apartment, and we see her taking notes via a recorder. But as she's talking, suddenly her TV seems to come on, and guess who's on screen but Electro. However, he's clearly not all there, quote unquote, as he's only speaking to he's speaking back. Essentially, everything he says is backwards speak. And while you can't understand him, there are subtitles on the screen that show what he's saying. And by that I mean the screen of the TV he is in. And unfortunately, even Sally unplugging the TV doesn't get rid of him. But put simply, it's just Max telling Sally he's getting stronger every day. Soon he'll be able to come out and touch her, and that she should have been there for him. And so with those few words, he ends up leaving her TV and runs out and ends up flying outside, and he ends up at Professor Williams' location, as she's currently walking down the street just minding her own business, and Electro manages to pop out of the wires and pretty much just attacks her, hitting her electricity and using it to carry her up to the top of a building where there's a maximum voltage sign. At which point, when he gets to the sign, he ends up blowing a hole in it, like what happened to him when he got his powers, and dousing her with neon gas. And when she asks what he's doing to her, he just says, "You like experiments, don't you, Professor?" At which point he taps into a high voltage box and uses that to further amp up his blast against her. However, thankfully, Peter was nearby and happened to find her briefcase, because she was carrying that when she got attacked. And so, using that, he ends up changing into a Spidey jammies, and sure enough, when he goes looking, he sees Electro attacking Professor Williams. He manages to thankfully stop it by blocking off the fuse box, and because Electro is now cut off from his electric connection, he ends up getting sucked back into the wires. Unfortunately, Professor Williams, she's still not doing well because her body was amped up with electricity. And while Spidey is able to keep her alive, unfortunately she's not in a stable condition, and an ambulance is called to rush her to the hospital. As such, Peter, MJ, and Harry end up meeting up outside, and are there when the ambulance comes to take her. And pretty much as they're talking, Sally ends up coming up to them and gives MJ the notes, but she also tells him that she saw Max, and he's been stalking her, and she thinks that Max is going to come after her next, like what he did to Professor Williams. As such, the group is a little disbelieving of what she says, but Peter is a little dubious, because the thing is, at the beginning of this episode, which I didn't mention because it wasn't because it wasn't part of the plot, Peter wound up saving these two kids at a factory at the outskirts of the city, or like an energy plant in the outskirts of New York, who were almost getting sucked into a fan. Now, and they of course claim that there was some kind of ghost there that turned on all the electricity and tried to kill them. But yeah, they do showcase very clearly that it was Electro. And while Spidey was initially hesitant to believe these kids, based on what happened with Professor Williams and Sally's protestations, yeah, at this point he realizes that there's clearly something up. There's clearly something up there. As such, he swings to the power station and pretty much calls Electro out. And sure enough, he comes out and they end up just getting into an argument with Spidey telling him, "Look, I want to help you, but you're nuts. But you're nuts. But you're nuts, and I want you to stay away from Sally." Electro pretty much tells him to shove it, blasts him with electricity, and then once more disappears. And so Spidey's just kind of left wondering what the hell what his ultimate plan is. And sure enough, when we cut back to MJ as she ends up deciding to listen to the notes that Sally provided her. And sure enough, Sally did end up getting a recording of Electro speaking backwards, which does confirm her story. As such, MJ calls Harry and Peter to meet with her so she can show them the backwards talk. And as such, when Peter ends up hearing it, he does realize it's backwards, and he downloads the file and converts it into a waveform, allowing him to play it forward, so to speak. And it's here where we actually do learn what Max was really saying. While the subtitles were probably what he wanted Sally to hear, he was saying something else. In this case, it's him essentially just explaining himself. He's saying, all I wanted was to not be alone, to have friends, to belong. I had to humiliate myself to get them, but now I'm just alone. I have nothing. I am this freak, and I don't want to be like this alone. I don't want to be like this forever. And so he pretty much just says, I can't go on like this. Before I do something, I have to test what I can do on someone who I think will appreciate it. And while MJ and Harry get that he feels lonely and he wants to be with Sally, they still don't understand what his ultimate goal is. But Peter does. It turns out that Max wants to recreate the accident that happened to him. The thing that gave him his powers. Only this time around, he's going to do it on purpose, and he wants to do it to Sally, so that she'll be like him, and they can be together. And the reason why he attacked Professor Williams before was because she was the trial run. He wanted to see if he could do it, if he could turn someone else into a being like him. It's just that there were two factors that stopped him from completing it. One was Spider-Man, and two was there wasn't enough juice. And as such, while MJ calls campus security to try and warn them about what Electro's going to do, Peter realizes that he has to go find Spider-Man and tell him what's going on. At which point, on top of that, he also tells Harry that he wants to call Osborn Security because they're working on high voltage containment devices, and he wants Harry to call ahead and say, "I want you to let Spider-Man in." Which even Harry's a little hesitant towards, but he don't really have a lot of time to talk about it because, sure enough, while Sally does take precautions to ensure Electro doesn't come after her, he still manages to get in, as while she unplugs all her electrical devices, her room still has an overhead light, and Electro comes bursting through that, and he takes her. And sure enough, he brings her right back to the power plant, and he once again resumes his experiment to try and transform her into a being like him. And while she protests, unfortunately, Max is still not listening. And even when Harry and MJ come by later and try to talk Max down, there's no getting through to him. As such, Spidey ends up coming in with the containment device, but unfortunately, when Electro sees him, he ends up blasting him back, and he fries the battery to the thing, so it's fused to the floor. As such, he continues hitting Sally with electricity and with more neon gas. And sure enough, you do start to see the transformation begin to take hold as her hair gets spiked up and her eyes just start glowing. But Peter is thankfully able to find a way around what Electro did to the containment device by grabbing an extension cord or whatever, and grabbing onto Electro, allowing his body to essentially be a conductor and pull Electro's power into the battery. And sure enough, doing this ends up sabotaging Electro's plan, and Sally is not transformed, though she's clearly not doing well. She's not as bad as the Professor, because I'm guessing I got close to completion, but not doing well. But not doing well. At least she's a little weak. As such, Electro is pulled in, and Spidey does, of course, need a break from that, because, well, guess what? He was, hit with electricity. I assume that if he didn't have his superhuman spider abilities, he wouldn't be alive. But when he falls to the floor, and needs a breath, Harry's the one that actually offers him a hand, which is actually a little surprising. But unfortunately, the containment device is still not enough to contain Electro, as it's starting to shake and you can hear him struggling to break free. As such, in one last-ditch effort, Spider-Man grabs the box, rips it off the battery, and throws it right into the bay. And as a result, it explodes with Electro still inside. As such, Harry and MJ manage to get Sally out of there, and they bear witness. Spidey wishes that this finally allows Max's suffering to be over, and the episode ends with Harry and Peter back in their apartment the next day, as Harry is just kind of lamenting what if he was actually wrong about Spider-Man, which I'll get to. So this was a good episode. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I mentioned before how one of the strengths about Electro in his debut episode was he had a sympathetic backstory. One of the things that I liked about him was that they really did emphasize just what kind of a person Max was. And they give enough reason to showcase why he goes full supervillain when he gets his powers, and it's sympathetic. You do feel sorry for him, and it does make his ultimate turn into Electro that much more tragic because, again, all he really wanted was companionship and friends, and because those things were continuously denied to him and he was always humiliated and belittled, it led to him snapping and turning into a full-blown supervillain. And to make matters worse, because of his status because of how his powers are manifesting, it ensures that he can never be with anybody again, because he's a big blue guy who constantly is exuding electricity. You can't even touch him without getting fried. So essentially, he's not, even as a supervillain, he gets the short end of the stick. And this episode does continue that. After the events of the party episode, they make it clear that he's just been in the wires of New York, always just popping over, and the only reason he hasn't manifested is because he's too weak. He needs more power to essentially gain a solid form. And it's only in this episode that he manages to finally succeed in doing that. And as a result, it definitely makes it feel even more tragic because he's just starting to feel the effects of being like this. He's clearly just doesn't want to be alone anymore. The only problem is, instead of trying to find a way to reverse his transformation, he wants to make someone like him. Because I'm guessing that for someone like Max, this is still a power trip. And we do kind of see that in the episode. While he doesn't want to be alone, he is clearly okay with flexing his muscles when the time arises. In the climax of the episode, when he and Spidey are fighting, Spider-Man initially tried to take the extension cord from the containment device and just jab it into Max, but because he fused the battery to the floor, unfortunately it wasn't far enough. And when that failed, he just laughed at Spider-Man and said, "You're coming up short, freak," and then blasted him. Or when he was attacking the professor, and instead of feeling remorse or saying, "I'm sorry, but I don't want to be alone," he's like, "You like experiments, right?" It's like at this point his empathy is down to 0, and while he doesn't want to be alone anymore, it's clear there's a part of him that likes this, that likes being the guy in charge, so to speak. And no, that wasn't a play on words or a pun. I hate puns. I don't like puns. Puns do not belong here. My point is, it's clear that he instead of trying to find a way to undo his transformation, he just wants to bring someone else into his world. And it's clear that compliance isn't really a factor when choosing a mate. As a result of this, it makes the whole transformation into Electro that much more sad. It's still, you do feel sorry for him because he doesn't want to be alone, but again, his actions are of someone who's clearly not mentally well. He wants to kidnap Sally. He wants to turn her into a being like him, whether she wants it or not. All because she smiled at him at a party. So, yeah, and on top of that, he attacked... On top of that, he didn't just attack her, he attacked the professor as well. Someone that the only reason he attacked was because he was looking for a trial run for his little experiment, and he thought that the professor would appreciate it, even though she's in a freaking hospital. So yeah, it's definitely, you do feel sorry for him, but that still doesn't make what he's doing all right. So yeah, I like seeing more. So I like that. I still like that they keep that going while still emphasizing that the guy is clearly not well and needs to be stopped. Well, on top of that, though, another thing about this episode I really like, Electro as the villain. One of my complaints with the party episode was that while it did well in establishing Max Dillon slash Electro and his motives and what turned him into a villain, the problem with that episode was that it didn't really understand. Is that by the time he gets to the villain, it's the third act, so you don't really get to see a lot of him doing supervillain stuff, and so it doesn't. And so the Electro portion of the episode doesn't really have as much weight to it. But in this episode, because he's already Electro from the beginning, it gives you more time to appreciate him as a villain. It makes it even better too. The first 2/3 of the episode are kind of creepy with him, because, like I said, he's constantly through because he's not strong enough to fully manifest until like the third act. He's just always in the wires of everything, and you can always tell when he's there when you can see blue sparks or electricity just flying everywhere, marking that it's Electro. That is that. So because he's not able to manifest fully, it gives him a kind of haunting feeling, especially when you see him starting to hack equipment and communicate through it. Like when he sent Sally a message during class. Or in the beginning of the episode when he attacked those two kids. You see his electricity flying all over the place, and the only thing you hear of him is him moaning or yelling. There's no audible sentences. You don't see him, but you do see his actions, and it's like a ghost, a haunting spirit, a vengeful ghost, or so to speak, just watching from the sidelines and waiting to strike. And I think it works well, especially because there are times you do see him attempt to manifest, but it's never a full manifestation. He either up until like I said with the third act, he either looks like super frail and and skin and bones, or he's incorporeal and see-through. It's clear that he's not weak, and it makes him look like a ghost, a spirit. It adds to a more creepy factor, especially since you don't know because he's there in the wires and could pop up anywhere. It's like he's watching and waiting for his a time to strike, and it makes the anticipation for when he strikes that much better, because you don't know what he's going to do or how he's going to do it, but you know he's there, you know he's waiting, and you know that when he does unveil himself, someone's going to get hurt. And I like that. I love that. It's great, and it helps build anticipation and helps emphasize just how much of how well a villain he can be. So kudos on that. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. My dog decided to peek in. Anyway, on top of that, another aspect of the episode I like, the stuff with Harry. Now, admittedly, it is still a small portion of the episode in comparison to the Electro stuff, but I think what makes this work here is it once again is expanding on Harry's character arc in this series. I mentioned how in the previous episode we had that little moment with Harry, that little moment where he looked confused, even if it was just for sorry about that, a couple seconds. You know that you can see, it's clear that his mindset is changing, especially considering his encounters with Spider-Man in the series. But this episode showcases that shift even more, as of course throughout the episode, Harry still has his usual contempt for Spider-Man, but when push comes to shove in the episode, and Peter asks Harry, "Look, I want you to do this favor for Spider-Man because he's the only one that can stop Electro," Harry does help. He does give the go-ahead, obviously, because Spider-Man got that high voltage containment device somehow, and by the end of the episode, he realizes that Spider-Man was genuinely trying to help Sally and stop Electro, because when he does manage to contain Electro, instead of damning Spider-Man, he offers him a hand. He does try to help him up, and by the end of the episode, it's clear he doesn't really know what to believe anymore, which I think is a good way of showcasing his development. That throughout, like, we've seen it here and there in the series. We saw that in the Lizard episode when Harry was looking through his father's notes. We saw it in the previous episode when we saw it in the previous episode. If just a little bit, when Spider-Man helped him, MJ, and Indy get away from Silver Sable's goons, and now we see it here when he helps Spider-Man, and his faith is actually bears fruit, and Spider-Man helps save an innocent girl's life. I like stuff like that, and it's clear, and I do like how it's progressing with him. Like, he has no idea what to believe right now. Like, did Spider-Man murder his father? Was his father the person he thought he was? Or if Spider-Man was the murderer, why did he do it? There's got to be, if this is the kind of man he is, then why did he take his father's life? I love shit like that. I love how it's working with him because it's showcasing that there is development. His preconceptions are being challenged, and how it's affecting him is a very realistic reaction, and I think it works well for the episode and for Harry's character arc. So kudos on that. If the series had continued on beyond its 13 episode run, I would have loved to have seen how that got expanded on. So I like that. If I had to give any flaws to the episode, it's again the whole kill the villain mindset that the show seems to have. Again, I don't know, like, if the series had continued on, I don't know if Electro could have come back from that, because at least at the end of the party, they made it clear that Electro was still out there. It was just gonna be a while before he could come back. But here, it definitely feels like it's a definitive end for the character, especially when the containment device he was in exploded in the middle of a bay. Yeah, I don't see him coming back from that, especially as a being of pure electricity. So, case in point, yeah, it does disappoint me that that Electro was killed off like that. Especially in regards to that they could have still done more with him. Though, to be fair, there's not who's to say he wouldn't have tried the same thing again. I don't know. I just feel like it's still a waste. I feel like it was still a waste to kill him off like that, especially for a series. So I'm gonna knock the episode. I'm gonna dock the episode some points for that. But otherwise, though, I still think it's a pretty good episode. I like that they continued expanding on the tragic aspect of this version of Electro. I like that we actually got to see him be a more effective villain, especially in regards to the anticipation surrounding when he would strike. And I do like that what we see with Harry and how he's little by little progressing and how on his feelings towards his father and Spider-Man. So I like that. It's all good stuff, and it's all good stuff, and makes for good entertainment. So yeah, that's about it then. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope you enjoyed this vlog, because next week it's time that we get to the beginning of the end of Spider-Man, the new animated series, as we see our favorite web-headed wonder get put through some mind games. So till then, I hope you have a good night, have yourself a happy Friday, and take care.